Welcome to the Unc Hour, episode 3. Today we're going to talk about the United States of America, the game of football, and how it all ties into global politics. We're also going to be reading from The Green Book by Muammar al-Gaddafi. Now, last week I mentioned a book by the name of Confessions of an Economic Hitman. In that book, it follows a guy who joins basically the global game, as I would call it. He gets recruited, psychologically profiled, and from there he becomes what is called, or what he calls, an economic hitman, which is essentially a new form of colonialism, where instead of you have a conquistador with a Bible, or you have a guy with an economics textbook, okay? And what happens and what goes on with these economic hitmen is they go into these developing third world countries and they say, hey, we have this amazing economic plan for you. You're going to want this. We're going to build infrastructure. We're going to do all these amazing things, but you're going to have to sign on to this International Monetary Fund loan or this central bank loan. So it is pretty much identical to the mobster tactic of shylocking, or, loaning money at interest so you can collect off of that. You loan somebody, $10,000 and you charge 25% interest, and that's where your profit is. But on a global level, these economic hitmen, these guys with their suit and ties and their degrees and their economic plans for these countries, they go there, they sell the loan. And now once you sign on to the loan, and all countries are doing this, whether it's America, China, Russia, once you sign on to the loan, you're pretty much on the hook for that company, or that country rather, to come in, build your infrastructure, do what they said, but you're going to have to pay back that loan with interest. And not only that, they're going to control a big part of your infrastructure. Their companies will. So there's a lot of South American countries where they're controlled by United States, international, really, oil companies and things of that nature. But they got in the door with these economic hitmen. So how does that apply to Muammar al-Gaddafi? Well, when you don't accept the loans and you don't want to play, you want to sort of do your own thing for your own country and their own interest. There's been other guys like this. You get taken out, because I can't imagine a situation where, you're offered economic textbooks, loans, you're hooked up. And not only that, you get United States military protection if you're a South American leader, if you're, a Middle Eastern leader, whatever the case may be. So it's literally an offer these guys can't refuse. So you take the loan, you have an infrastructure set up. Yes, there's going to be a corporation taking all your natural resources, but people get jobs. You're protected by the United States military. It's literally an offer you can't refuse, right? So put yourself in a situation like this, like you're a South American politician, right? And you want to rise to power in some way, whether it be through a presidency or another political office, right? You're going to play ball, because if you don't play ball, what happens is your country gets either invaded or you get taken out. Because what happened to Gaddafi? Muammar Gaddafi was a leader of Libya who was doing a lot of good things for his people. He was really nationalizing a lot of their industry. And if you were a citizen of Libya, you had certain perks. So he was more of a national socialist style of, or he wouldn't call it that, but he was more of a national sort of socialist style leader, in the sense that he would have benefits for people of Libya, and he didn't want to play the big international game. So what happened to him? He was murked. He was taken out on a global level. Like they stabbed this guy pretty brutally publicly, and he was taken out. So what happens is, I was reading in Confessions of an Economic Hitman, is that what happens to a lot of these South American dictators, if they don't want to play ball, if they don't want United States military protection, that's when covert ops comes in, and you might have an unfortunate accident, a car accident, a plane accident, something really terrible could happen. So that's when a lot of these guys decide to play ball in a major way. And it makes sense. And I don't think that the economic hitmen or this new form of colonialism is necessarily a bad thing. I think it can work out in some ways, and I think it can help out a lot of countries. And I think it, you know, it's not all bad and it's not all good. That's for sure. But we're going to be reading from Gaddafi's book, Why? Because believe it or not, when it comes to sports, Gaddafi nails it. Gaddafi absolutely nails it. And he talks about sports quite a bit in this book, believe it or not. Most people don't know that. A lot of people like to meme and post Gaddafi because he had style. And I'm not admonishing this guy to an insane degree, but I have to give him credit where it's due in regards to his commentary on sports and how that plays out in the global game that I just described. So the global shylocking technique it's done by China, it's done by Russia, it's done by all global powers, right? It's, like I said, no different from a mobster going up to a business and saying, you should pay for our protection money or something bad's going to happen. It's the same exact thing on the global scale. It's, hey, you should pay this protection money, you should accept this loan, or something bad could happen. You could get into a terrible accident. I mean, you should have seen what happened to that other guy. It's awful. We don't want that for you. We want what's best for you. We have this economic textbook that is going to really develop your country. We are economic experts. Versus, like I said, in the past, a colonial model might be, okay, we're going to come in with this Bible and we're going to convert you guys. It's probably going to help you out a lot, but we are going to take control of your infrastructure and we're going to call it something new. It is what it is. And also we got all these ships. You guys, just play ball, okay? That's what's going on in a nutshell. So whenever you see a leader like, Gaddafi or Saddam, they get sort of broadcasted as the worst thing to ever happen to the world. What's really going on is they don't want to accept the loans. They don't want to be controlled. That's what it comes down to in a nutshell. So we're going to talk about how Gaddafi nailed it with sports, but how does sports play into the global game, specifically the game of football in the United States? How does football, which is coming up, football season is in the air, everybody can feel it, everybody's excited, everybody loves it for the most part. I do. How does that tie in? Well, think about it like this. If you were to explain American culture to a European girlfriend, let's say you had a European girlfriend and you're trying to explain American culture, you would have to talk about football. You'd have to talk about the military-industrial complex, and you'd have to talk about how basically everything in America is designed for people to sort of join the armed forces, essentially, because America is the world police. It is sort of the mercenary army, the muscle of the global geopolitical power structure. Okay? You'd have to mention these things if you were to explain United States of America culture to a European girlfriend, right? So when you talk about the game of football, and it's all going to tie in, and then we're going to read Gaddafi's book. So here we go. So when you examine the game of football in the United States, you have to recognize the fact that it is a mock military exercise, right? There's an offense, there's a defense, there's an air attack, there's a ground attack, there's guys on headsets coordinating attacks versus the other guys on headsets. They are coordinating a defense. It's an entirely militarized game. The quarterback and the coach would be sort of the general, and the linemen, the linebackers, the defensive backs would be more of an infantry. You could say the wide receivers are kind of like the Air Force, right? And your running backs would be like the tanks for the most part, right? The game of football is entirely militarized, but it starts from a very, very, very young age. Football will always be king in the United States because football is an intricate part of the military-industrial complex. What is the military-industrial complex? The military-industrial complex is the idea that a huge part of our economy is weapons manufacturing and arms, uh, military equipment, whether it be Raytheon, Lockheed Martin. There's some company called Brown that's very good. In Economic Hitman, he works for some company called Maine. What do? They produce missiles, airplane technology, all sorts of weapons. A lot of times they don't get used, but guess what? A lot of people get paid in that process. If you were to visualize a global conflict, and we see them all the time, if you were to visualize a global conflict as a fireworks show where a bunch of things explode, but a bunch of people get paid in the process because they got paid a ton of money to produce those missiles and they exploded. Did they do their mission? Well, we got paid. So we want to keep producing these missiles and we want to keep getting paid. That's the whole game. So a conflict could be very, very, very profitable to companies like this. These are big companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, because they get paid to produce fireworks. And they're very much a proponent of any conflict because it's good for their bottom line. And a lot of times these companies are subsidized by taxpayer dollars. So with the game of football, it being simulated combat does tie in to our instincts, and it does tap in to that ceremonial aspect of our existence that we have innately as human beings. Because with football, it is a religion in the United States. You gather on Sundays with your friends and family. You wear the same colors, and you share moments of victory and defeat right there in your living room. That's very powerful. So we have to recognize how powerful that is and recognize that we're all human and we're all susceptible to these ceremonies. So instead of going to church on Sunday, people in the United States, they go to their televisions or they go to stadiums and they participate in this religion and this combat sport, this simulated combat, which is a lot of fun. It's the best sport ever to play. It's really, there's a lot of strategy to it. So it is quite honestly a superior sport. There are health implications. A lot of these guys have serious concussion issues after their careers are over. They have serious health problems. And a lot of these guys, even the guys who are really good, are retiring at 29. Andrew Luck, Todd Gurley, just examples of Pro Bowlers, guys who were the best at their position but eventually retired because they saw the writing at the wall. If you keep playing and you keep getting hit, you're going to have some serious repercussions in terms of your own personal health. So it is a gladiator game. And it's funny. I'll tell you right now, there is a high school in Georgia called Buford High School. And they just built some, I think, like $62 million stadium for their high school football team. Something outrageous. A top 5 European soccer player could walk into that stadium during a high school football game. Nobody would recognize them. I'm telling you, a top 5 European football player. Because Americans do view soccer as dishonorable. And that is because of the whole South American inspired, I'm told, diving culture, where you have these grown men rolling on the ground, pretending to be hurt. And that's a huge part of the game. So that is seen as extremely dishonorable. That's why soccer will never catch on in the United States. Because in the United States, you have this simulated combat warrior game where guys are pretending not to be hurt. They could break a leg, and this has happened before, break a rib, have a serious concussion, and keep playing. They want to keep playing because that's considered, you want to give it all for your team, and that's considered honorable, which is in contrast to soccer where you guys have rolling on the ground crying. It is dishonorable. It's at times completely disgusting. The whole flopping and diving culture. So the reason why I say that, because that's how ingrained it is within American culture versus soccer, and basketball's number 2, baseball, but like it's a distant number 2 because right now with football, we have not only the NFL, we have college football, which is now professional. The college athletes are now getting paid quite a bit if they're really good. And that's a professional league. There's nothing collegiate about, like, these aren't student athletes anymore. These are professional athletes who might attend an online class or two, maybe. It's certainly not a priority for the Ohio States, the Oregons, the Texas, the Florida, the big-time college football teams are not worried about online education. It's not a priority. They're professional athletes. So we have the NFL, we have college football. We also have the UFL, where 2 smaller leagues merged to start a spring football league. So we have professional football basically year-round. Now, we also know that it is basically a religious ceremony for the most part. And it's fun. And I'm not going to sit here and bash sports ball like one of these nerds. I'm going to be honest about the instincts that it taps into. So here in New England, right, I grew up with the New England Patriots. And it's interesting that this part of the country who has such a rich history of starting this country for the most part, right? With the founding fathers, a lot of them are from Massachusetts, and the New England Revolution started here. But a lot of that energy gets converted by cheering for the New England Patriots on Sunday. So your religious energy, you're not going to church anymore, you're not really caring about your country anymore. All that energy is getting converted into being a New England Patriots fan. The energy is real, but it is being managed. So let's tie it back in to the global game. 2001, big events happened in September, really big events. After that, in 2001, let's bring it back. What did I personally witness? What did I witness as a young man growing up after September of 2001? What happened is the United States invaded Afghanistan. Why? To find a guy in a cave, right? That was a big part of it, but also a huge part of it was to secure some opium fields. That's a huge bottom line to that, right? What happened after that? Well, I personally witnessed the opiate crisis in the United States, where people would get, because after 2001, I personally noticed that, the amount of opiates that were around, or where people were getting addicted, that went up after 2001. And I do believe it correlates to the United States seizing control of these massive opiate fields and this massive global industry, right? So I personally believe that something like the Patriots or the Red Sox and the Celtics, and they were all winning championships during this time period, did serve as sort of a distraction from the opiate epidemic which was occurring. The professional sports victories did act as sort of a pain reliever or a painkiller to the serious pain I was seeing, where people were getting addicted to these substances and they were ODing. So it's interesting. You have the United States goes over to Afghanistan. Opiate fields are a huge factor in that. That's the bottom line. We might as well just take control of these opiate fields. You know what I mean? So that's happening. Then back in the United States, there is a proliferation of people with opiate problems during this time period that it really increases after that. Okay, as a young man, I'm like, wait a second, what's going on here? Or more so when I'm like in my early 20s, I'm like, wait a second. Looking back, there's certainly a correlation between this seizure and in control of these natural resources and sort of the effects that happened in the United States where more people had issues, right? So looking back, it's like, wait a second. And then you think about the New England Patriots, all of that religious, rebellious, revolutionary energy that was there in past generations now gets converted, gets sort of transmorgified, if that's a word, or alchemized, right? It gets alchemized, all that energy, into being a New England Patriots fan. And guess what? They're winning championships all the time. It's amazing. Oh my God, we're the city of champions. It's so cool. There's no opiate crisis. You know, it's like, it's kind of silly when you look back on it. And that's kind of how I feel about that situation, right? And when it comes to somebody like Tom Brady, people have been kissing his ass for decades, and it's rather sick. And it hasn't really stopped. And after a couple decades of everybody worshiping a goat, right? Oh, he's the goat. This guy's the goat. That guy's the goat. You're worshiping a goat. It's like, it's time for a fucking reality check. Like, you know? And yeah, so the psychology of being a sports fan, we have to acknowledge how powerful it is. It is very powerful when you are wearing the same colors, sharing moments of victory in the living room with your family, emotional roller coasters. That's a bonding experience. So we can't just dismiss it. And it is fun. It does tap into your instincts. It's an extremely fun game to play, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, all of it. It's awesome. So we have to acknowledge these things. From here, we have to sort of anticipate that football season is coming up. Are there any global conflicts that are occurring? Because if we do see any propaganda in regards to those conflicts, it will occur during football season. If we take it back to the early 2000s, the Bush era, football games were all about a military celebration, if you will. The flyovers, the halftime shows, the commercials, all of it. So we have to recognize the fact that we do live in a Spartan-style military-industrial complex civilization, and we do have our Spartan game, and they are certainly intertwined, right? And it goes deep. I mean, any high school football program most likely has a relationship with local law enforcement, right? There's former law enforcement that played on this program. They want to see you do well. Hey guys, have a great game. And that's not a bad thing at all, but it is part of our culture. It is what it is. So let's get back to this idea that sports, specifically the game of football, is a powerful thing. And it is coming up. You can feel it in the air. Football season is upon us. I told a story on Instagram and Twitter about my first football coach was a guy by the name of Coach Leo. Coach Leo, it's so funny. His name was Leo, and football would start in August, which is Leo season, and he would always talk about heart. Like, oh, you got to have heart. And you had to have heart to get through his preseason because he would push us to the limits. Kids would routinely cry like at practice. Like Leo was pushing us. We were hitting, we were doing bear crawls, doing sprints, doing laps, doing leg lifts, all of it. Just very, very hardcore, but we were really intimidating as a team after all of that. After all that training, you know, we would do wild stuff. We would scream pain. Like when he would blow the whistle, we would all scream pain. And we would do that before games. So instead of like, you know, let's go team, there would be a bunch of like 12-year-olds with rabies talking about pain, like screaming pain. Like, and this is the funny thing he did as well. He would always feed his animals. So if you got a interception, fumble recovery, he would give you steak. He would give you a literal steak. So if you if you did any of those things, that's a steak, and he would keep track of it. So at the end of the season, you might have 8 steaks, and he would have a cooler full of steaks, meat, that he would give out to his animals at the end of the season. Like, oh, okay, this guy, 4 fumble recoveries, 4 interceptions, you get 8 steaks. So that was a fun thing, and it's a fun thing to harken back to, right? And just think about a guy, giving out steaks to his Pop Warner football players. It's incredible. So let's get back to it, and let's read a little bit of Gaddafi, okay? Because I highlighted this from his book, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. because he nails it. So just give me a little second here, just because I got to find my highlights in regards to Gaddafi. But other than that, oh, here we go. Sport, horsemanship, and the stage. So we're going to read this. We're just going to read it. We're going to go for it. But before I do, I just want to say what's up. Again, we're at the halfway point of the Unc Hour. 1 hour a week. And the format I use for this podcast, just me. It's just me. No guess. I don't even pull things up. I don't pull visuals up. It's just me for 1 hour and a week. And I'm trying to establish a real cool thing here. And a real fun thing we can do once per week. So I'm really excited about it generally. I love doing the Unc Hour. And it's something that people have told me to do for a while. And I feel like I'm doing it at the right time. So, just a little Unc Hour announcement before we get into this. Muammar Gaddafi's The Green Book. And we're going to talk about sport, horsemanship, and the stage. And I always say, I love playing sports. I think sports are great. Sports fan culture, tough. Real tough. With the gambling, the obesity, the alcoholism. Tough. And I understand watching the game because for a lot of guys, you know, that's the one time they get off of work. And like, yeah, I'm going to watch the Patriots. I'm going to watch the Bengals, the Dolphins. I'm going to do it. I totally get it. And I do it too. I love to watch football. Oh, I'm a college football, top 25 college football guy. That's my thing, you know, and the occasional NFL. So I get it. I totally get it. And I participate, but we're just acknowledging the situation in which a lot more is going on than just the game, baby. So here we go. Sport is either private, like the prayer, which one performs alone inside a closed room, or public. He's acknowledging the spiritual aspect of competition right from the jump. Performed collectively in open places like the prayer, which is practiced corporately in places of worship. The first type of sport concerns the individuals themselves, while the second type is of concern to all people. It must be practiced by all and should not be left to anyone else to practice on their behalf. He's saying get in the game. He's saying what I said. He said, play sports, man. Don't be a sports fan. You got to get in the game. You can't just be a spectator. I think that I personally would rather spend the day, playing catch, playing sports myself, playing hoops versus, let's say you watch the NCAA March Madness tournament. Like, okay. It is unreasonable for crowds to enter places of worship. He's talking about the religious aspect of this. Just to view, within our culture, people do worship other humans as false idols, and that's never a good thing, right? It is unreasonable for crowds to enter places of worship just to view a person or a group of people praying without taking part. It is equally unreasonable for crowds to enter playgrounds and arenas to watch a player of a team without participating themselves. Sport is like praying. And this is Gaddafi. Nobody talks about how he nails it with sports. Sport is like praying, eating, and the feelings of coolness and warmth. It is unlikely that crowds will enter a restaurant just to look at a person or a group of people eat. It is also unlikely that they will let a person or a group of people enjoy warmth or ventilation on their behalf. It is equally illogical for the society to allow an individual or a team to monopolize sports while the society as a whole pays the cost of such a monopoly for the exclusive benefit of one person or team. He's bringing up something real because a lot of these giant stadiums that are built are use taxpayer dollars. So people do pay for these giant stadiums, and they're not playing sports themselves. They're not getting exercise themselves. In the same way, people should not allow an individual or a group, whether it is a party, class, sect, tribe, or parliament, to replace them in deciding their destiny and in defining their needs. He's just talking about the participatory nature of spectatorship versus the participatory nature of breathing, eating, worshiping, playing yourself, right? Private sport is of concern only to those who practice it on their own and at their own expense. Public sport is a public need, and the people cannot be either democratically or physically represented by others in its practice. Physically, the representative cannot transmit to others how his body and morale benefit from sport. Democratically, no individual or team has the right to monopolize sport, power, wealth, or arms for themselves. Sporting clubs represent the basic organization of traditional sport in the world today. They retain all expenditure and public facilities allocated to sport in every state. These institutions are social monopolistic agencies like all dictatorial political instruments which monopolize authority, economic instruments which monopolize wealth, and traditional military instruments which monopolize arms. As the era of the masses does away with the instruments monopolizing power, wealth, and arms, it will inevitably destroy the monopoly of social activity in such areas as sports, horsemanship, and so forth. The masses who queue to vote for a candidate to represent them in deciding their destiny act on the impossible assumption that this person will represent them and embody on their behalf their dignity, sovereignty, and point of view. However, those masses who are robbed of their will and dignity and reduced to mere spectators, watching another person performing what they should naturally be doing themselves. The same holds true. This is such a huge point because even if you're one of these super smart people who watches conspiracy videos all day, right? You're still in the theater seat. You're still a spectator. You're still watching the world through a screen versus participating yourself. And Michael Hoffman, a legendary author, that's what he talks about quite a bit, is the part of this equation where even people who are, getting into truther content, you're still in a theatrical seat. You're still in a spectator role. The same holds true of the crowds, who because of ignorance fail to practice sport by and for themselves. They are fooled by monopolistic instruments which endeavor to stupefy them and divert them to indulging in laughter and applause instead. He's talking about clapping seals. And when you see an obese person that's drunk wearing a jersey, do they resemble a clapping seal? It's tough. That's why I say play sports, man. Don't you necessarily want to be a sports fan for the most part. Sport as a social activity must be for the masses, just as power, wealth, and arms should be in the hands of the people. Public sport is for all the masses. It is right of all people for their health and recreational benefit. It is mere stupidity to leave its benefits to certain individuals and teams who monopolize these while the masses provide the facilities and pay the expenses for the establishment of public sports. He's talking about how ridiculous it is that somebody might be a huge sports fan, but they're not participating in the activity themselves. It's beyond parody. It's quite ironic, right? But at the same time, I understand it as a painkiller. If you're really busy, this is the one time you get to relax. I get it. So, the thousands who crowd stadiums to view. Another thing I gotta point out, right? People describe to me like the cost of a ticket for like a Patriots game or like a Red Sox game and like a Celtics game. I laugh out loud, like involuntarily, because I can't believe how much it costs and the fact that people are willing to invest that much. Like it's wild to me. Like tickets are very expensive to these events. The thousands who crowd stadiums to view, applaud, and laugh are foolish people who have failed to carry out the activity themselves. They line up lethargically in the stands of the sports grounds and applaud those heroes who wrest from them the initiative dominate the field and control the sport, and in doing so, exploit the facilities that the masses provide. Originally, public grandstands were designed to democrate the masses from the playing fields and grounds, to prevent the masses from having access to the playing fields. When the masses march and play sport in the center of playing fields and open spaces, stadiums will be vacant and become redundant. I'm just going to read the highlights because you pretty much get the idea now. So, that sport is a public activity which must be practiced rather than watched. I agree. Those who direct the discourse of life for themselves have no need to watch life working through actors on the stage or in the cinema. Bars, Gaddafi. Bars. Those who direct the course of life for themselves have no need to watch life working through actors on the stage or in the cinema. Entertainment, meant being Latin for mind, whether it's sports entertainment or Netflix entertainment, it's about entering and holding your mind. And you wonder why things are the way they are, because a lot of people are just watching the show instead of participating or getting active themselves. And that's partially why my show, the Unc Hour, is 1 hour per week, because I think that within that, an audience can have their own lives. You know what I mean? Like, and I can have my own life, and there's life experience that happens in between shows, right? It's not a situation where, and I don't know how guys do this, but there's a lot of guys that I know personally that they can talk for 4 or 5 hours a day. I'm 1 hour per week. That's perfect for me because it ties into experiencing life in between shows for me and the audience. So I'm just going to take a little coffee drink break. Awesome. The Unc Hour, episode 3. From here, what's going on in my personal life? Well, I'm working on a book. I'm just looking to see if I have a copy of my other book. I don't have one around me, which sucks. But I'm working on a book about a surf assassin. So that's like my main focus right now. And I want to have that out in November. So I'm all in on that, as well as some of my other work endeavors, outside of the internet, outside in the big world, all sorts of activities in that regard. So that's the big thing that's going on with me. Basically, the process of writing a fiction book is insane. I've hired a coach, and the one thing I could compare it to is painting, because you literally paint with your words. You paint the scene, you paint the characters. You don't just tell people. Show versus tell is a huge part of fiction writing. It's not about, hey, Billy went down the street. That would be a tell, right? You would have to describe the road, the trees, Billy's build, his outfit. That's what you'd have to do. From there, you can literally paint the entire scene. Give me 1 second. I'm actually going to grab, you know what? I'm not. I was going to grab a copy of The Charter, A Comedic Journey Out of Hip-Hop Hypnosis, available on Amazon and iTunes. But I'm not going to get up from the seat because I'm going to go an hour straight of Unc Hour episode 3. So that's what's going on with me. After this, I got some family things to do. I got some outside activities to do, still working all the time. But from there, I'm actually just going to be surfing and working on a surf assassin book pretty much all weekend. So that's going on with me, and that's pretty much where my focus is. So when it comes down to Gaddafi, the global game, and football, we got to think about what's going on today, nowadays, and what we can anticipate this September. The big game happening August 30th. This is my conspiracy theory that I got to share with you guys. This is my prediction, conspiratorial. We're going there right now because I want this out there, because the thing with making a prediction like this is that when you're right, it's pretty cool. And when you're not, Oh, well, forget about it, right? Okay, so August 30th, Ohio State, the national champions in college football, a giant hundreds of millions of dollars are involved with the Ohio State football program, plays Texas August 30th. Texas, another $100 million program. The University of Texas. So, like Gaddafi talked about, something like the University of Texas, something like Ohio State, they are publicly funded because your tax dollars go towards these universities. Students take out loans from the federal government that they have to pay back, right? So not only are entities, right, like Texas and Ohio State, they're getting taxpayer money. They are public stadiums. They are publicly funded, just like Gaddafi said. What was I going to say? That's what I was going to say. They have a lot of money, an insane amount of money. And somebody like Arch Manning, who's the starting quarterback, is making $3 million a year, at least. He was making $3 million a year just to sit on the bench, right? He was going to practice every day, but still, he was making a lot of money last year. Big time recruit. But what we're going to see in this particular game, Texas versus Ohio State, is, in my view, some sort of militaristic display. We do have conflicts occurring, right? Global geopolitical conflicts. I think, there was Iran and Israel. They were going at it quite a bit a few months ago. So we're told. Or those could have just been fireworks, exploding and people getting paid, because that's how I think of it a lot of the time. So, but with this particular game, that's the big game, August 30th. Huge, 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 huge game. Texas versus Ohio State, a 4-hour endeavor. A college football game, a big college football game is like 4 hours nowadays. It's almost, if you watch the game, the whole thing, it's damn near 3.5 hours at minimum, but a lot of times it goes to like 4 hours, right? Well, if you go, it's 4 hours, right? But, it can be up to 4 hours. It's a huge event. But with this particular game, Ohio State is the home state of our vice president, J.D. Vance. And J.D. is from Ohio. And I can't help but think that there's going to be some sort of militarized display at this game. I think J.D. Vance will go to the game 100%. Texas versus Ohio State. He's got to get that camera time, that influence, and that global leadership perspective, right? That show. He's got to be there. He's going to be there. But I think from there, I think we're going to see some Bush era militarized display of some sort of propaganda event, I do believe will occur at that game. When we harken back to the early 2000s, we had the Patriots, the New England Patriots. We had the Yankees winning a few World Series. Part of that played into the patriotism that was occurring in the early 2000s, right? When you remember what this country was like after that time period, it was very patriotic, but somewhat bloodthirsty as well. People were down after September, right? People were really down to roll, ready to rumble. And if you wanted people to rumble in the United States, where all this infrastructure is in place for giant, and the culture more so is in place for large scale operations, right? And you wanted to do a display, you would do it during football season. The global game isn't necessarily soccer. It's more so football because it plays out on the world stage more so. And now something like soccer in, a country like England plays the same role. It plays this religious, simulated tribal conflict, right? Because in both situations, soccer in England and football in the United States, you have people's tribal energy, natural, regional, tribal energy being converted. You're going to other regions and you're competing against this other somewhat local region, and their friends and family are going to wear colors, and your friends and family are going to wear colors, and we're going to either beat you guys or lose. And it does get disturbing when you hear a sports fan, and I understand the sports fan, you hear a sports fan use the word we. Oh, like we play the Dolphins, we play the Bills. That's when they've been fully converted into the religion, right? And then you think about New England and who has the biggest cultural impact, guys like Bob Kraft, Dave Portsoy, I think his name is. Portsoy or Kraft, and it's like, wait a second. Do these people have the best interest, or are these people just trying to create false idols and profit from it? You know what I mean? So that's a huge aspect of it as well. Okay, we're back. I just got a copy of The Charter, a comedic journey out of hip-hop hypnosis, available on Amazon and iTunes. This is my book. So I wanted to bring this book because I wanted to talk about a little bit more of fiction writing, which is happening now. I'm going to have a book comparable to this size available in November, and it's probably going to be a 10-hour audiobook. This is a 9.5-hour audiobook where I play every character, play every role. So you got to check that out at hiphophypnosis.com or thecharterbook.com. So the book I'm writing now, and I've been writing it since 2022, is a book about a surfer who has a workplace incident, and that workplace incident is witnessed by a mysterious benefactor, and that mysterious benefactor recruits this surfer into a secret society, and he becomes a surf assassin. So the book is I can't tell you the title, I already have the title, but the book is about a surf assassin. So that's what I'm working psychotically on, and I've been working on it since the summer of 2022. I just wrote it. You know, I wrote 1,000 words a day for a while, or every time I wrote, I got to 1,000 words. After a while, I got to 100,000 words, which translates to about 200 pages. I work with my coach that helps me turn this into a quality fiction book because it's a very difficult process. It's insane, man. Writing a fiction book, like I said, the only thing I can compare it to is literally painting, where you paint scenes, you create these scenes, you create these characters, and you don't necessarily dive into their inner worlds as much as you would think. You more so show what's happening to the reader, and it's actually up to the reader to think about what's going on in their inner worlds. So one bad habit I've had is I do what's called head hopping, where I talk about things from one character's perspective, but then boom, I'll switch and talk about things from another character's perspective, versus every chapter has to be from one person's perspective. Or if you are going to head hop, somebody like Frank Herbert does a little head hopping, the guy who wrote Dune, but he sets it up prior to the head hop. So that's one thing that I'm, sort of correcting, as well as constantly showing versus telling, always showing and describing and painting things versus just telling people. Because I think if you're a really logical person, you would probably struggle with fiction writing, because you would just say what happened. You would just say it very logically and very succinctly. What fiction writing forces you to do is paint pictures in other people's minds. Okay? And I think it's important that people read fiction, because with fiction, people can understand narrative. And when you examine some of the narratives that come out of the mainstream media establishment, it's really easy to poke holes in those narratives, right? Because you or somebody, or you watching this, have read fiction in the past, versus most people are not reading on a regular basis, or they've perhaps lost that ability. I think that with ChatGPT and some of these technologies, I think we will see a rise in illiteracy. I think when where you were to combine ChatGPT with TikTok, I think a lot of people are going to end up illiterate. And you see illiterate people on the internet that are barely literate, like certain groups, instead of I don't, they say I own, ION. Or what else do they do? Instead of as hell, like this is silly as hell, they'll say ASL. ASL is an SL. And it's pretty brutal. But I do think we will see a rise in illiteracy with some of these technologies. And I think that the slavery of the future is a slavery of convenience, right? Because let's say hypothetically, somebody is outsourcing their own thinking via AI. The AI is thinking for them. They're playing video games. They're ordering Uber Eats. They're sitting down, but they're getting everything they need. But they eventually become a blob and an android. And then they're not in the real world necessarily. They might even be in a strictly digital existence. That's the new form of slavery, where people are basically automatons being controlled. You know what I mean? So I think the theme today's show is to go out there, play, and get dirty no matter what it is in life. Because when you're a spectator, you're not getting dirty. When you're a spectator, you're not really participating. And sports would be the best example, but I think you can think of other examples as well, right? Situations where you watch people acting in the theater, watching a Netflix show, binging on that, something like Love Island, right? Instead of going out there and finding love yourself, what you do is you watch Love Island for episode after episode after episode. And when you've been alchemized into a spectator, you've basically become an android, a slave in a new sense, right? That would be like me just watching YouTube of surf videos instead of going out there and learning myself. So one thing I'm going to do for the book that I mentioned, the Surf Assassin book, is I'm going to write a few essays on surfing, because in June of 2024 is when I started surfing, like for real. And I've made tremendous progress. I went from crashing out for hours and hours to crashing up and really doing things every time I go out that I've never done prior. Like every time I go out is like the best time I've ever been out. So that's one thing I find strongly encouraging. That's why I love it. And the thing about surfing is you're either all the way in it or you're not. It's something I would actually discourage people from starting unless they're all the way in, unless they're obsessed with it. Because the reason why surfer becomes such a strong identity is because a surfer is somebody who goes out and surfs in the winter here in New England. Like if you're a real surfer, you surf in the winter. You surf in the winter at like 6 a.m. if the conditions are right. And I've seen this, and it's a situation where it's like I don't even call myself a surfer yet, because there's a definition and a criteria to that title. It's kind of like carpentry. Like I've never really called myself a carpenter because I know what a real carpenter does. I know what a real carpenter is capable of, right? A surfer and a carpenter, they kind of have that title where you can't just casually call yourself that. So, but yeah, it's something that you go out and you participate in, and you go out and you crash out and you get dirty and you become a participant in life versus a spectator in life. We see this a lot with the internet. Oh my God. With the proliferation of streamers, right? What it does is it sort of mimics friendship, right? So you're on this screen and you're interacting with this streamer live and you're hanging out, but it's kind of this digital experience where it's not like real camaraderie or real friendship. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's a total parallel to what Gaddafi talked about, because the public stadiums are digital. They really are. Especially with football nowadays, because there's streaming services with professional football games where you have to pay for this streaming service to watch the game that you've been looking forward to all week. So let's say you're just a regular guy, right? And you look forward to this one event per week where you hang out with your friends and family, you eat. It is spiritual, it is religious, it is tribal. That's how powerful it is, okay? So we can't say, oh, sports ball is dumb. No, it's the most powerful thing there is, really, in our society. Why? Because it taps in to all of those instincts. So here we have this guy, just a regular guy, who's totally looking forward to this weekly event because he gets to experience all of these things. And then boom, oh, to get this game, it's only streaming on this certain service. It's $50 a month. And then you have to sign up for it in order to experience all those powerful things that we just talked about. Very, very, very powerful things. Religious, spiritual, tribal, all of that energy. So it becomes a situation where the arena is not necessarily physical a lot of times. A lot of times the arena comes in the form of digital streaming services where instead of paying for your ticket to go to the stadium, you have to pay $50 a month to have access to this proto-religious, proto-spiritual, tribal ceremony that happens to totally coincide with not only your schedule, but the schedule of your friends and family, right? It's interesting, man. It's really interesting. When I talk about the game of football, also, we have to talk about how it's become dominant, and something like baseball just isn't really a part of people's lives as it used to be. Baseball used to be considered America's pastime. Baseball has fallen out of public sight for the most part, other than people who are baseball people. Everyday people aren't necessarily involved with the Red Sox, for example, like they used to be. Like I used to be able to name every player on the team. Now I can't name one. Versus something like football has 24/7 around the clock coverage because it's tapping in to those powerful instincts, and those instincts play out on the global scale with another huge aspect I've never talked about, but it's huge, is the fact that football stadiums and football in general, it's a huge military recruitment sort of situation. Huge. Like you will see recruiters at college football games, at NFL football games, and when you have this massive display of flyover where jets fly over and you see the might of this global empire, and as a young man, it's something you might want to get involved in. And before you know it, you're over in a foreign country and you are helping seize control of natural resources. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. People talk about colonization and they use the word colonizer as an insult. I never understood that. I think that if somebody's a colonizer, it's like they're kind of epic in a way, and nobody wants to talk about that, but it's true. And so, in closing, Unc Hour, episode 3. What I like to do is I sort of think about what topic I want to talk about during the week, and then when it happens, it happens. And I feel as if just going off for an hour is the correct format for me personally. Because in my personal life, I don't really talk that much. Like, I only talk to like a handful of people. And it's, it's kind of fun for me as well to go out and create this little weekly stadium, this weekly that is not publicly funded. It's just me and you, and we're just out here doing a weekly podcast, 1 hour a week. So I hope you enjoyed the reading from the Green Book by Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi. Nobody had style like Gaddafi. That guy could really dress. But he goes into some other things here. It's a reasonably short book, and he makes some good points, and he was an interesting historical figure. He's a victim to the global game. He was absolutely roasted on. It's a tough situation, and he definitely sort of exemplifies everything I'm talking about with his green book. What's green about? It's about grass. It's about going out and touching grass, and not only touching grass, sprinting on it, playing on it, getting dirty, all of that. So in closing, the Unc Hour episode 3. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next week. See ya.